Welcome to the Joe Moglia Podcast, featuring Hall of Fame football coach and world-renowned business leader, Joe Moglia. Let's join the host of the Joe Moglia Podcast, Jamie King.
Welcome back, everybody, and thank you very much, Mike Kelly, for that outstanding introduction. And without further ado, it is Joe time. And good morning to you, Coach. We've got so much to get to. Hello, and how are you, my man?
I'm fine. I'm good, Jamie.
Let's
start this show.
People don't know the way you break my, He likes doing that, by the way. We're going to start with the world news. Viktor Orban, Coach. Hungarian voters turned out in the greatest number since 1990s, ending Prime Minister Viktor Orban's 16 years in power. He was seen as the model for right-wing populism in Europe. What does this, basically his fall, say about where the world's political winds are actually blowing right now? Your thoughts on him being ousted as prime minister?
I think with all the different things that are going on in the world, I think is from a social perspective, I think there is very much still a liberal element in terms of approach to life, et cetera. But I think in terms of democracy, in terms of how you run things, in terms of approach to life, in terms of approach to business, approach to war, et cetera, there's much more of a conservative bent, I think, going on, around the world today. And that's part of the reason why some of these things are happening now.
Well, that's one of the things happening on another front. Pope Leo XIV and President Trump, the Chicago-born pontiff, hit back at President Trump after Trump said he was, quote, not doing a good job, unquote, and said he should stay away from the radical left. The Pope responded while departing for an 11-day visit to Algeria to promote Christian-Muslim coexistence. When the leader of the Catholic Church and the President of the United States are publicly feuding, what does this say about our moral leadership on the world stage, Coach? This is not good. You got the two of the world's biggest figures kind of going back and forth. What was your take upon hearing this?
They've got different sets of responsibility, though. I mean, both certainly want world peace. I think, the Pope, to his credit, is not afraid of the president. The president, to his credit, is not afraid of the Pope. We talked about this before. Well, I do believe a lot of the things that Trump is doing are good things. He's a narcissist, and a narcissist doesn't think they're right. They really, really do deep down know that they're right. So it doesn't matter who he might be talking to. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. Right. It could be another president. It could be before he was president. It could be president. It wouldn't matter. So the president's never been uncomfortable sharing what he's felt. And I think part of the reason why Pope Leo is good, I think, for the Catholic Church is because I think he might shake it up a little bit, and he's not afraid to speak up.
And, wondering, Catholics are up in arms about some of the things, and it's almost like when the president attacks the Pope, and then the Pope tries to respond, and some people are saying, why is the Pope getting political? And then other people are saying, why is the president criticizing the Pope? And both have, as you said, their platforms. Your thoughts on how they can maybe meet and try to work this out? It's not a good look for, I think, either side. I know, as you said, the Pope wants peace. That's what he's there for. I mean, he really promotes peace and has always done that. But now you put him on the spot when you start talking to him about the war initiatives and what we're doing, and then the president says, stay out of it, and he says, well, I want to give my opinion. I mean, it's just one of those things that's getting worse in terms of better.
One of the things with regard to the Constitution of our country, we certainly allow freedom of religion, but we try to keep church and states separate.
Right.
So one is not, one allows the other to operate the way they believe they need to, the way that the way they believe they need to operate. I think, for the most part, I think the Catholic Church has been so ultra conservative. Right. We don't have enough priests to go around. We don't have enough nuns to go around. We don't have enough people to be able to help us move in the direction I think that the church might want to move to. So I think for the Pope to be, more aggressive and more liberal and to speak up, I respect the fact that he's not afraid to say something. I don't want our Pope and I don't want our president feuding on a world stage. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
The Pope probably should not be commenting on what's going on in terms of from a military perspective as far as the leech goes. But by the same token, the Pope wants peace. So he's expressing his thoughts with regard to that.
Right.
Our president has no problem telling him, just butt out or do whatever he's supposed to do. So as long as each has a job to do what they believe is the right thing to do. That's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. And does it look good for them to be feuding on the world stage? No. Is it the end of the world? I don't know. Like what? Like how bad is it, other than what the appearance is? Right. I don't think anything. Nothing the Pope or the president is going to do, other than the actual actions in Iran, are going to have an impact on what's going on geopolitically in the Middle East now.
Yeah, I just think it's one of those things where I've never seen it in my lifetime. Maybe you have never seen it in yours, in terms of a church leader like the Pope and a president in any type of feud. It's just something I've never seen. I think most of us are all like, hopefully they can meet and cooler heads will prevail. So we'll see. You're talking about geopolitical. That's one of your biggest points you've always talked about, your concerns. North Korea's Kim Jong-un delivered a speech expressing pride in the country's rapid expansion of nuclear weapons and missiles, calling it the right choice, with the world's attention laser focused on Iran. Is anyone paying enough attention, in your opinion, in North Korea? And how dangerous is this blind spot with Kim Jong-un pounding his chest saying, hey, by the way, we've got nuclear missiles?
Kim Jong-un, Jamie, has had nuclear weapons for a long, long time. I mean, North Korea has been a threat for a long, long time. Kim Jong-un is also a narcissist. He brags about, what we're going to do and what we're going to develop, et cetera. We have to worry about North Korea are not friends of ours.
Right.
But it's too late for us to go in there and tell them that they can't continue to kind of do what they need to do. So Kim Jong-un has been a threat. This is not the first time with him.
Right.
This has been going on a long, long time. So you've got, Russia, who's not crazy about us. They've got nuclear weapons. China, I'm sure, has nuclear weapons. You got Kim Jong-un that has them, and the possibility of a war that will end all wars, meaning end all, maybe the world, is a possibility. Now, I think everybody knows that the devastation that a nuclear war would cause is so frightening that nobody wants to go near there. But sometimes not everybody's got their full faculties, and some of these people are nuts. And sometimes if the ego gets in the way and they make the wrong decision or they do it out of emotion, that'd be a horrible thing to do. But Kim Jong-un wants the rest of the world to understand, I've got my weapons, nobody mess with me.
Right. We will keep an eye on that situation, and it's ever evolving there. Moving on to the second quarter, the U.S. naval blockade in the Straits of Hormuz, of course, they're going to halt all traffic. That started at 10 a.m. yesterday after the weekend peace talks in Pakistan collapsed without a deal. Iran, through Revolutionary Guard Corps, has vowed to retaliate. Coach, this is a massive escalation. What are the real military and economic risks of a full naval blockade? And does this feel like we're moving more towards a deepening conflict between us and Iran?
Well, I think right now we thought we had pretty good news, a few days ago.
Yeah.
And we found out the next day that what we thought everybody agreed to, everybody didn't necessarily agree to. Now, Vance was over there for 21 hours. They came away with, we're making it very clear, you can have no nuclear weapons. It has to be total access to the strait. They're saying we want control of the strait, and we should have the ability to be able to develop our own uranium deposits so we can have enrichment, so we can have our own bombs. Well, we're saying you can't do that. And they're saying, well, that's what we need to be able to do. That sounds like a conflict to me. So everything was always so good a few days ago, and now kind of it winds up looking a little scary. We still have the 2-week ceasefire. What I worry about is that the Iranians, they know they're not going to win this war. So how can they hurt us? By just holding, they don't have to beat us. They have to just wait it out. Right. The longer they wait it out, the greater the price of oil is going to go. If the price of oil gets to $125, $130 a barrel and stays there for a while, that's going to cause a global recession. While we say we're energy independent, we are the biggest producer of oil in the world. We are, but we also we're part of a global economy and a global market. If the rest of the world is struggling from a recession, we're going to be struggling with that as well. So I could see that being one of the objectives that Iran has, that I just waited out. We just waited out, and ultimately we forced the price of oil to go up, and we're going to die, probably get killed one way or the other. So we may as well go down, having a negative impact on the rest of the world, at least from an economic perspective, with price of oil high.
You know, the one thing I took away from what you just said was the fact that, and I've seen this on many reports, the Iranian people, time is on their side. They're in no rush to do anything, and they're saying basically, we'll wait this out, because they don't give a damn about their people. Their people can rot and live in the worst conditions and have nothing, and they don't care as long as their agenda is met. Meanwhile, you know, we have people complaining. Everybody around the country wants better gas prices, and midterms are coming up, and there's pressure points on this side. So from their perspective, as you just said, they're willing to wait it out, and they don't care because they don't care about their people.
I think it's the leadership within. It's not the Iranians per se, right? It's the leadership within the Iranian world, the IRGC, and that's what they want. And that's what I'm saying. I think right. I think it's okay with them if they wait it out. Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy when you think what's going on. It's crazy, but we'll see what happens. We'll see where we are in a couple of weeks.
Are you happy with J.D. Vance? I believe 21 hours total in negotiations. They walked away from Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner. Would you like to see anybody else involved? Are you happy with that delegation, or do you feel that?
I think the delegation is a fine delegation. I mean, maybe we could ask the Pope to go over and kind of see how that works out for us.
Or Joe Moglia.
Right. At the end of the day, though, if Joe Moglia goes over or Jamie goes over or whoever goes over, the United States is making two things very clear. And we seem to have these non-negotiable. But what, by the way, I agree with. No nuclear weapons, period. That's it, end of story. Total access to the Strait of Hormuz, period. They're saying, well, we're not going to give you that. Okay, there's the roadblock. Somewhere in there, if they're not going to give, then there's going to be a fight. A fight's going to continue. All right, so, and remember, from an economic perspective, when we shoot a missile to take down a drone, we have like a missile that costs well over $1 million.
Right.
Taking out a drone that costs $25,000. Our arsenal of weapons, while plentiful and while significant, is not unlimited. So as more we shoot at Iran, and the more we're spending money on Iran, that's where I think Iran just says, okay, we can, per your point, we can wait this out. And I don't think Russia or China or North Korea minds us using our arsenal to go after Iran.
I think they should send your show over there. It could calm.
I'm sure that would create total chaos.
That it would, Coach. Iraq, by the way, the Iraq-backed militia and their activity in Iraq continues to escalate. The U.S. forces being targeted, and the Iraqi government is caught in between Washington and Tehran. We've been down this road before. What's your thoughts on Iraq and that becoming a full battlefield again? And what lessons haven't we learned from 2003 and that invasion? Whereas Iraq's there, on the precipice of something there. What's your thoughts on that aspect?
I think it's all pretty much the exact same thing. There's never really been peace in the Middle East.
Right.
Right. Then within the Middle East, you have radical element. Then you have the Israeli-Palestinian problems. Then you have the Iraq-Iran problems. Then you have, just wherever you are, there's unrest. There's bitterness amongst groups that goes back, generations and generations and generations. So I think right now the biggest single thing on the table right now is probably what's going on. Not probably, I believe is what's going on geopolitically with us and Iran, but that impacts the entire East, Middle East, the Middle East. So until I think this thing gets resolved, I think if they open up the strait or come up with something reasonable with regards to the strait that Trump can declare victory on, and they swear they're never going to do anything with nuclear weapons. Well, we're not going to trust that, but there's no reason why we can't just go in and check it ourselves, in a couple of years to do whatever we need to do. Well, we'd say that. I mean, I don't see any of this going away or getting better until the situation between the United States and Iran is solved, or at least put to bed.
It's like you say, we want 15 points we sent them. They sent us 10. If we could come up with something that the really non-negotiables, like you mentioned, about the gas prices, about the strait being open to us at all times, about no nuclear ambitions, I think, there's some things we can maybe work with to get this thing done and get our American servicemen and women back here safely. So we're praying for that best outcome.
If I were a rational leader within Iran, I think I would say I'll stop. I'll give up the idea of producing nuclear weapons. I don't have to have the say, but I need some say in the strait.
Right.
And in return, you've kind of devastated our country. We need some reparations from you. If we said we're going to give access, that's not going to hurt them. They just have too much control. But we're going to give access to whoever we're supposed to, Iranians supposed to give access to, I think they might be open to do that as well. But you got to give us reparations. You got to help get our country back on its feet. I think Trump says yes to that.
You mentioned earlier about potentially claiming victory. Trump has said we have won in terms of the fact that even as the blockade starts and all the things there, what winning looks like. We
haven't won yet.
No, feel like we've won yet?
No, we haven't won yet.
We've defeated their hierarchy, and we've knocked their military pretty much stone cold in terms of their Air Force and their naval fleets and all that. But winning with this, I think, is getting them to, like you say, stop all ambitions on the nuclear side. When will you feel the win is there?
We have thousands of Marines with boots on the ground. We have a blockade that exists in the Strait of Hormuz. Until Hormuz opens up, and there is truly free trade allowed, I don't think that's when I think there is a winner. That's when I think it's over with, and we can move forward from there. I think Trump knows the impact that's going to have on the global economy, on our economy. As you said, midterm elections are coming up. If he can claim victory with the strait, I think he does that.
All right. It's like you've got ESPN, because we're turning the page to the third quarter of the Joe Moglia podcast, to the economy, and the Fed held rates steady at 3.5% to 3.75% in March, with Chair Powell acknowledging the war's oil shock has complicated the inflation fight. With the blockade launching, of course, the Fed's calculus just got even harder. What would you be telling your board right now if you were running a major corporation in terms of what to do or what to look for?
I think we've got to be prepared for higher oil prices. We have to be prepared for inflation. I think the Fed has said that.
For how long, Coach? I mean, what do you think?
I think the answer is I don't know. Until, number one, I don't know when it's going to get wrapped up in the Middle East. So it seemed like the very first week or two, we said, we're going to wrap it up right away. Well, that didn't happen. So I think it was the president on his address the other night said, he talked about how many days we've been in all these different wars, and there's only 32 days so far. Well, now it's about 45 days. I don't know if it's going to be up in 55 days, but that's what it's got to take. So rather than me guess, I would say if I'm responsible for my team, if I'm responsible for my firm, well, I got to be prepared for higher oil prices for a much longer period of time. I got to be aware of the fact that there may very well be a global recession. To what extent will that hurt me and my company and our employees and our clients? And I've got to be prepared for that now. When this happens and we have a real problem later on, at whoever's leading whatever industry, whatever company says, oh, well, look what happened here. We couldn't do anything about that. That's an excuse. BAM doesn't allow excuses, right? So I think you've got to be prepared. If I'm running Ameritrade, if I'm running Merrill Lynch, if I'm running General Motors, I think we've got to be prepared for significantly higher oil prices until that threat goes away.
Okay. We wanted to find out about businesses because they've absorbed roughly 80% of tariff costs in 2025. JP Morgan estimates that shares could shrink to 20% in 2026 as companies begin passing costs directly on to customers. What should everyday Americans be doing right now in preparation of this coming, Coach? I know everybody says tighten your belts and all. It's not easy for families to do that are just trying to get by. Your thoughts on this complex situation?
Jamie, I agree it's not easy, and I agree it's painful, but like, what are you going to do? I mean, most of my life I didn't have any money, and I had a family of 6 that I had to take care of. So, what do? You do tighten your belt. You might need a second job. There's certain things that you may not be able to go on a vacation this year. You don't go out to eat as often. You don't have to have steak once a week. Again, remember, I've been there. I've been in that situation. I've lived in a loft with no heat for 2 years. When I moved to Wall Street, because I need to take care of my family, I moved back home with my parents for 2 years. For 4 years, I wasn't on my own. When I came here to Coast Carolina, I lived in a hotel for 9 months. So there are times when I know financially I'm okay now, but I went through half my life because it was difficult from a financial perspective. So that's what you've got to do. That's what you got to do. Now, you want to complain about it. That's not going to fix anything. So what's your plan? If I know prices are going to be higher over the span of the next year, or if I anticipate that for my family, well, do I need to make sure I have some saved? Well, maybe I don't go on that vacation. Maybe I don't get that extra, go out for dinner, that type of thing. I can have Netflix at home. So I think tightening your belt and putting off on buying. You don't buy a new car this year. You hold off on a year or 2 or 3 until you have to then maybe buy a used one. No, so there is nothing else that you can do. You've got to be able to make some adjustments. Got to be able to adapt and adjust to difficult situations. And it's painful. Yes. It's difficult. Yes. But the alternative is to sit there on your hands and just not do anything. You're going to go down with the ship then.
Right. We want to look at finance and stocks. You're especially, of course, world-renowned leader. And in terms of, we just talked about tightening your belt, but there are investors asking the question of me for you all the time. And with oil spiking, blockade being launched, inflation sticky, the Fed on hold, what would be your take right now as far as a retail investor? Where would they be putting their money in this environment? What's the biggest mistake people are making now? And people that want to put money somewhere, what recommendation do you have and how would they go about it?
I think the biggest mistake anybody makes is when they panic. So they start to get scared. They start to sell what they have. And that's not necessarily the right thing to do. If you haven't done anything now, the fact that the market's pretty good today might take advantage of some of the strength to be able to make a couple of decisions. So does it make sense now to potentially trim? Not sell, but trim your position so you have a cash position. So in the market, should the market really go down, then you have the ability to be able to buy, at much lower prices. Trimming into strength is never a bad thing anyway. I don't think now's a bad time to own some of the, the energy stocks,
right,
like LNG, liquid natural gas, Exxon or Occidental Petroleum. I don't think it's a bad time to own those. Even if energy doesn't continue to go, it comes under control. I don't see it necessarily going back to $65 a barrel anytime soon. And at $65 a barrel, the major oil companies were able to make money. So if we're averaging $85, $90, $95 a barrel, you're going to see some nice earnings start to come in the energy companies over the span of the next probably 1 or 2 quarters. That's not a bad area to be in. And then I would be careful, though, with stuff that really requires travel, airlines, cruises, cruise companies. I'd be careful. I'd probably not want to own those. And but if you haven't done anything yet in strength, now's not a bad time to trim, unless you're convinced this is all going to work out and you're going to be fine. Remember, you can write it out. You can write it out. There's nothing wrong with writing it out. The only thing that's wrong is panicking and just turning it around and selling.
Okay. We want to turn to the sports page on the Joe Moglia podcast. The NFL draft is just days away. Plenty of buzz around key prospects with teams like the Patriots, Colts, Cowboys, Panthers all in the spotlight for their picks. As a former Hall of Fame, well, current Hall of Fame, but former head coach, what's the one thing most fans don't understand when it comes to making a draft pick and picking the right players? What separates the franchises that do it well and the ones that don't, in your opinion, in terms of getting it right on draft day?
One of the things I did when I was at Nebraska, hoping that I would ultimately get a Division I head job, I knew that wherever I went wasn't going to be, the national championship team. It'd be somebody that's probably struggling, somebody I got to be prepared to lose for a while. Thank God I did it. But how do we handle all that? I want to make sure we understood how to recruit. So I did a 5-year study and I think kind of like in the business world, when we announce a deal, everybody makes a big deal about the deal. But the key to the success of a deal gets announced is the integration takes place over several months or several years potentially. You got to get that right. Nobody talks about that. We were great at that at Ameritrade. We were 11-0 on those. The same thing in terms of recruiting. You make a very, very big deal that you get this star high school kid or star from another school, but the reality is you don't know for a couple of years whether or not that kid is necessarily gonna be the right kid. And if I were involved with the NFL, I would go back and I would do a study. I'd go back several years, at least with the same type of administration, and I will look at all the companies and which one, all the teams, and which ones have success. What are they doing that others are not doing? What are the common mistakes that some of them are making? Without me being in the room with them, I don't know what those mistakes are. But you certainly have had a chance to take a look at a guy throughout his entire college career. Do you know, bringing a great quarterback and he doesn't have an offensive line or doesn't have the right receivers, that doesn't help much. Bringing a great quarterback, he's got some offensive weapons, your defense or special team stuff, that's going to be a problem. Yeah, so you got to be able, you got to know those things, right? So what's a winning formula? You need a good quarterback to really be able to win. But if you have a good quarterback and you don't have a good defense, if you don't have a good special team, you're not going to win either. So how do you make sure you got the right players at the right position that are going to maximize what the potential is? And then if you get the right quarterback with a good line and some good skills guys around them and solid defense, solid special teams, that's how you get to the Super Bowl.
You had great success. I had great success. And I think things that I always look for is, I can see the forest for the trees. I mean, you're going to tell me we got a great secondary when we're not good, or a great linebacking core when we're not good. I mean, you have to know when to identify, how to identify, then know what to go out and get versus saying, oh, it's a positional need, we should just go here or here, without really looking in depth at your personnel, what you have, because you can mask some things, but you can't mask a lot. If you can't rush, you can't tackle, you can't do the basic things, you don't have somebody in the defensive secondary that can cover a top end guy, you're in trouble. So you got to stop lying to yourself. And somebody like you that's done it so well, I mean, that's the thing I think you would be so great at that next level, because you're identifying, top talent and the ability to make sure that matchups and things are covered, which is part of your mastery, Coach, in my opinion.
Well, I appreciate that, Jamie. Thank you.
Thank you. You got it. I did want to ask you this: the Masters just over. Rory McIlroy, 2-time winner. You have a chance to watch that, in pretty big win.
I did. So at the beginning of the day on Sunday morning, we had two guys in the driver's seat, both at 11 under at the beginning of the day. That was Cam Young and Rory. And so I feel an affinity to teach these guys, and that Rory McIlroy is from Belfast, Northern Ireland. Well, that's where my whole Irish family grew up.
Yep.
That's where my mother was born. My cousins, they still all live there, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm always rooting for him. Plus, I like the guy. I like the way he's handled himself over the years as a professional. But the other side, Cam Young, well, everybody knows he went to Wake Forest. He also, I don't know if he grew up in the Bronx, but he went to Florida Prep. That's my high school. So that's an all boys Catholic high school in the Bronx, on the same campus as Fordham University, where I played football, baseball, where I began my coaching career. And I think the golf team doesn't play too many inner city schools. They play the schools up above, up in Westchester County, Scarsdale, and the more affluent where the country clubs are. So I had a guy, two pretty good choices. One of whom I went. One's from Fordham Prep, one's from Northern Ireland. So
No
I
loss.
couldn't lose the other day.
And of course, Fordham, where the fields are named after you, by the way. Oh, by the way.
Not the golf course.
Not the golf, but it should be. And that brings me to a very important question, Coach. I asked to be invited to the Bill Gates, Warren Buffett poker game, which you told me I couldn't because when I said I'd be quiet, you said that would never happen. So, but I would like to find out if you've played the Masters. We know you love to play golf. Have you played the Masters? Without question, your Rolodex, you're tied into somebody there that knows somebody there that knows somebody. That's a bucket list thing for me, Coach. I want to play the Masters. You and I, and we'll get the other two for some. Maybe Bill and Warren could come, or somebody. But let's do it, Coach. Can you make that happen? The Augusta dream is alive on this end. Have you played there before, or do you want to play there at some point?
I played there 4 times.
Oh, okay. So there you go. You already did it, and I didn't get a call. So there you go.
I played it 4 times, and I went to the Masters once.
Okay.
Me watching the Masters, follow people around. I did that once. I don't need to do that again. But playing there was always a special thing. But I have not played there since I got back to football. So
Okay.
I played there when I was at Merrill Lynch and when I was running Ameritrade.
Wow.
I played there since then. And
It was
if I were invited, I would go. If they said I could bring somebody else, then I'll make sure you're on the list.
What was the experience like for you, seriously, in terms of?
Well, it was great. It was great. Again, I think it's the Masters takes place at a nice time of year, so sometimes a little bit on the warm side, but for the most part, it's pretty beautiful. And the whole Augusta exists for the sake of the Masters.
Right.
They shut it down. Like they probably shut it down now, and they'll shut it down all summer, open it up sometime in the fall. So you only open 4 or 5 months a year, 5, 6 months a year, and it was great playing there. I found that. The rough is not bad. It's a pine straw. So if you know what you're doing, you should be able to hit off a pine straw. You can find the ball. Plus, you got people that will find it for you. Plus, they got caddies. The fairways are immaculately groomed. What's difficult is you've got really, really tough bunkers and heavily bunkered, plus water, and the greens are like lightning fast. So to me, is the speed of a green, and 13 is fast. Augusta might be 14 or 15, and it's difficult then to hold the green. You got to know where to be able to put the ball on the green to give yourself a shot at 2 putts. I'm sure there's probably more 3 putts during the Masters event than there are at the U.S. Open or the PGA, as an example. But it was a special place because of the tradition and everything to be able to play there.
Was there any memorable shot you recall, or one particular swing that something happened really big, or?
No.
Okay.
I don't have one. I'm sure I made a couple good putts at one point.
Okay, there you go. We'll take that. Hey, folks, we want to get to the BAM section very quickly. Coach, talking about the power of BAM in terms of there's so much going on. The NFL Rookie Symposium is going to be happening. NBA, WNBA, Major League Baseball, NHL, all pro leagues out there. These athletes have extraordinary influence and reach on the youth population. Is there a possibility at some point, maybe you meeting with some of the commissioners of these leagues and instituting BAM, or for the men and women that are playing, for them to pass it on to the next generation? Is that something that you may entertain as time goes on, as far as getting this to the leagues that can really influence others?
Yeah, I would. I've in the past, if I were asked to speak to a leadership group about the leadership philosophy, not dictating it to it, just being able to talk about it. And then good leaders, a really good leader is open to learning. And I think I've got a unique enough background. It doesn't mean my way is necessarily the only way, but it is a good way and has worked really, really well over 5 decades, both personally and, of course, 2 entirely different careers. So I think I would be happy to speak to a group, from a leadership perspective. And then if they're open to that and say, what is it maybe what was Joe's competitive advantage? And does some of that apply to us? I had dinner last night with Jamie Weinbrich, our president at Coastal, and we talked about, is there a way maybe where I could spend a little bit more time, not necessarily in athletics, but maybe with regard to the rest of the campus, with students or faculty, whatever it might be, where we could talk about my perspective, what's going on in the Middle East, my thoughts about the market, my thoughts about finance, investments, leadership. And one of the conversations we had, you could go in as president, or you go in as a boss and say, I want you to listen to so-and-so. But if it comes from them, then they're far more receptive to be able to do that. So I think that's the same thing. If the commissioners of the league, had any interest in what I had to say and they wanted to sit down and talk about it, I'd be glad to do that. I don't anticipate that happening because they have their own special interest groups and they have their own perspective. They kind of want to run things for the most part their way. Most of the commissioners are not looking for a lot of advice from other people.
Okay. Well, maybe they would. I think it'd be a great program for everybody if we can get that to the leadership people and also the athletes that the kids look up to. If they're preaching BAM, I think it could be a worldwide initiative, which I think would be great for people to have those kind of foundational aspects. Look at me. Hey, it's time for Joe's closing thoughts. Of course, his advice for the week ahead. We've covered the market, sports, the world, the war, everything going on. Coach, what's on your mind and what do you have for us as far as advice for the week ahead?
I think two things. One, I think, let's make sure we keep our people's, our military and all the people that are involved with putting their lives on the line in the Middle East, not just Americans, but over there, kind of, let's pray to bring this thing to a conclusion and really pray that it doesn't go on. It's still going on 6, 9, 12 months from now, which is, I think, is a possibility. 1, 2, earlier you kind of talked about it, kind of your typical family in our country, or even one that's got some money, but not that much money, and things, if we're going to have a period of time where prices are going to be significantly higher, well, again, anticipate that. Don't sit there and complain. These are things that go on in the world. We have times of prosperity. We have times of when things are not going so well, and you got to be able to adapt and adjust. Those things are not always easy to do. Tightening your belt is not always easy to do. But these are things that you got to think about, whether you're responsible for a business or you're responsible for a family or responsible for yourself.
All right, folks, to learn more about one of the world's greatest business leaders and, of course, many times over Hall of Fame football coach, go to Moglia.com. It's Moglia.com for interviews, highlights, great Forbes articles. I mean, they're fantastic to read, and the latest and greatest when it comes to Joe Moglia. Coach, thank you again for an outstanding week. Wish you the very best in the week ahead, and we always love hearing from you. You take care, and thank you for leading the way as you always do.
Thanks for a good show, Jamie. Take care of yourself. Take care, everybody.
For producer Ron Matea, Joe Moglia podcast announcer Mike Kelly, the man himself, Joe Moglia, I'm your host, Jamie King, reminding you to never miss an episode of the Joe Moglia podcast. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of the Joe Moglia Podcast. Reminding you to learn more about Joe by going to the sensational Joe Moglia website at Moglia.com. That's Moglia.com. That's Moglia.com. When you visit the website, you'll be able to learn more about Joe's schedule of appearances on CNBC as well as other speaking and television appearances. You can also read all of Joe's incredible articles featured in Forbes magazine. For Hall of Fame coach Joe Moglia, producer-director Rob Matea, and Joe Moglia podcast host Jamie King,